The question is, can you say anything about the South End with regard to,
It's the newspaper for Wayne State University, and I was excited about that, wondering what you knew, if there's anything more.
okay, about the South End, the Wayne State University paper? Can you say anything about that?
Sure, I can say a little bit about that. Well, John Sinclair was the manager of this band, the MC5. And so they had an office right down the street from the South End. And I kind of forget the name of the newspaper, but I know I could always go there and get a good argument and, and hit the other side of things. So that was a good spot for me. And so, but the main thing is that the South End newspaper, we did special 2 or 3 special editions, and under the leadership of John Watson, we were able to take the whole quota, which was 50,000 papers, and pass them out to all the factories around the city. So, was our candidate that was running just one plant. So that's what I know about the South End.
So it sounds like it played an important role.
Absolutely.
How effective was the, I guess one could say, propagandistic machine in trying to, I guess, not really unionize, but to gather together white workers to act antagonistically? Did you find, it kind of touched on that in the documentary, but did most people in Detroit kind of gather together along class and worker lines, or because those people often had the better of the shitty jobs, was there some antagonism in response to the Black Power movements and the union, the movement of Black workers within the plants?
As we started off, we were syndicalists in reference to Black workers, and there's a part in there where we put out a drum, in addition of the drum leaflet in Arabic, and that was one of our moments of growth in terms of not only Black workers, but non-white workers. And because that was the pecking order of who got the worst jobs. And the worst jobs at Dodge, Maine was working up under the line with spot welding gun over your head like this all day for 7 hours. And that was working on underneath the chassis. So, you know, all that is, and then you got the sparks coming back on you. And even though you might be covered with this, that, and other, it's still gonna get through there every now and then in the course of a day, in the course of a year, blah, blah, blah. But what I'm saying is the misery of it, and that gives rise to an organizing situation. And so I agree that that's a point about the conditions of organizing and what it takes to do so.
One of your friends and comrades, Darryl Waistline Miller, who's also author and Marxist intellectual, happens to be on the Zoom, and we're very fortunate as he has great knowledge about this revolutionary union movement as well, and he would like to weigh in a little bit in response to some of the questions that have been asked. So go ahead.
Okay, I want to thank you for having this opportunity. And I want to speak specifically to this question about white workers and the environment of the late 60s. You know, we were able to accomplish some things in the late 60s, early 70s, because the economy was expanding. What that meant was, as these Black workers entered into the bottom or social order of the factory system, they did not have to compete over the same jobs with white workers. And I'm mentioning this point because once we take out the color factor, there's always competition between workers for jobs. However, we didn't have to face that cutting edge because the economy expanded. What that meant in concrete terms was the white workers went up the ladder and made more money at higher paying jobs. And the Black workers first came into the janitor department, then assembly. I got hired at Chrysler Motors in 1971, and I went in as an assembler. So we're talking about a social movement taking place during what I recognize now was the last stage of the industrial order in the factory system. I got one more comment I want to make, and that's to Don Abdul Roberts. I'm 70 years old. I met Don when I was 16 years old. At 16, he would bring books to the office, and he ensured that all of us were able to develop an intellectual understanding. He nurtured our intellectual curiosity, and for that, I have loved this man for over 50 years. He has been a friend, a mentor, and if none of us are ever sane again, he is one of my one true friends. But the story you're about to see, The League, I don't know if y'all saw it yet. It is an excellent movie. It accurately portrays the level of struggle that took place. But yeah, we was able to avoid the antagonism with white workers because they went up the social ladder, and you would have to be out of your mind to take lower pay just to fight with me. You know. Can I do another one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, about the South End. This was another period of time when the distribution of paper and literature had a profound effect on the people of our country. Being able to distribute 50,000 newspapers anywhere, right, is gonna have an impact. The League was formed in 1969. The movie, if I recall, comes out in 1970. In 1967, the rebellion took place, July 1967. At that time, it was the greatest uprising against the state since the Civil War. It had a profound impact on the country. At that time, I didn't understand that. I was 14 years old delivering newspapers. But shortly after, in 68, I ended up joining the movement. So the South End, under the editorship of John Watson, was able to introduce questions to America like the Palestinian question. We literally introduced our country and its working class to the situation taking place in Palestine, to the fascistic role of the Israeli government. And the South End made all of that possible. Back then you had intellectual giants like Freddie Perlman, who's just in history one of these great anarchists. He was a bona fide anarchist, he was the real thing. But he was an intellectual of immense gravity. We used to go to Freddie Perlman's print shop, right? When we run out of paper, and we borrow paper and books from him. I remember getting a book on economics by I. Rubin from Freddie Perlman. I mention this because all of the older guys, and all of them were older to me, they made sure they nurtured our intellectual curiosity, right? They took honor in our intellectual development. In the late 60s, there wasn't a system of community colleges. The League of Revolutionary Black Workers helped pioneer in Michigan what became the series of community college, like Wayne State Community Colleges. So these were heady times, man, where it was intellectual curiosity. We distributed papers in the hundreds of thousands, virtually 1 million copies, and we was able to impact the people in this country and make a difference. I believe that.
How do you think that you can build a revolutionary movement based on what you learned at that time, either you, Donald, or Darryl, to address where we are at this time in terms of trying to build revolutionary movement?
If I may, because I'm on a roll now. Y'all got me feeling good and stuff. I'm an old man. You know, I think that what we face today is so different, new, and fresh. What I mean by that, Abdul mentioned earlier how we were like anarcho-syndicalists, you know, a big word. To shorten that, we were cut in the image of the IWW. We were a set of free-willing radicals like the folks is out of our heritage, the International Workers of the World, the Wobblies. That was our orientation, not because we simply choose to be that ideologically, but the development of the factory system itself creates a certain outlook about how you organize in society. So we organize from the standpoint that this dynamic pool of energy, the social force, was organized in a factory system. Jump ahead 70 years, 60 years. Today it's not the force isn't organized in a factory system. What has changed is the technology in society, the way products are produced, and how people are organized. See, we are discovering the means to do propaganda and agitation, do organization different. And, you know, a couple of times I honestly thought about leaving America because I saw these fascist terms taking place. And then out of the blue, you had Occupy. Before Occupy, it was horrible. But this, I mean, okay, from my point of view, in 2010, we had the Detroit Social Forum. It generated a little activity, about 20,000 people at a time. And we had a chance to congeal intellectually, emotionally, right, ideologically. But then you had Occupy that hit, bam, kind of led by Chris Hedges in the intellectual sense. And it started changing the dialogue and the discussion in America. I remember those days, and there was a lot of debate around it, like, why do y'all use the word occupy? Isn't that the mentality of colonizers, blah, 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 blah. I was too glad that all these young people arrived on the scene to argue about stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? And we were able to get together and organize some folks in Detroit based on the Occupy movement. Then you had the Black Lives Matter movement that took place behind the murder of Mike Brown. It did not begin as a Black Lives movement. It began as a hands up, don't shoot movement. Right? A political struggle took place in a section of people that would, I guess, found and give organizational form to Black Lives Movement. They won political and ideological hegemony of the movement. But the movement that came out of Ferguson was hands up, don't shoot. And there was a demand directed against the police. Black Lives Matter altered that. And today we can see the evolution of Black Lives Matter. I'm not against money, don't get me wrong. I don't act like an Indian monk or peasant where you push money around on the end of the stick. But look here, man, a lot of these leaders in Black Lives Matter is millionaires, right? And I'm not exaggerating about it, I'm just saying that is the evolution we face. So when I look at the events today, we have got to figure out how to reach the working class in this country with a simple message of salvation, emancipation. We have to overcome the lingering impact of identity politics, right? But identity politics is a form of syndicalism, right? Where you define yourself based on your identity. The first identity of the working class movement coming from the lion workers, man, the tailors, man, 200 years ago, was their organization as craft workers. When you organize yourself on the basis of what you do, that's identity. That's the origin. We're not dealing with evil. We're dealing with historically evolved phenomenon. Or let me say that another way. We're dealing with shit that just be happening. When tailors organized themselves, they organized as tailor because that was their labor identity, right? When you get to the factory system, it begins to break down identity on that basis because it amalgamates workers together based on just labor rather than craft and skill. We call that the industrial form of unionism. As the factory system began to decay and die, people start organizing themselves outside of the labor process based on how they came together, which is called identity. Today, I believe we reached a juncture where we can overcome that, right? So to the question, what do we do today? We figure out how to organize on the basis of concrete demands. Saying class is too broad. On concrete demands. The one thing we can't surrender is the woman question. Whoever, I'm telling you, it's serious. Whoever win the women in this country is going to win the revolution, period. If we do not figure out a way to win the women, 65%, we are going to be slaughtered. We can talk about all equality fights we want. We can talk about who need to do what. If we lose women, they are going to murder us and our kids. But I mean, that's what it looked like, and now I go getting dramatic, you know.
Okay, thank you for addressing all of those things so eloquently. And I don't know, Donald, if you want to add anything to that, or if there are other questions in the audience that I can't see people raising their hands. Please forgive me. If you are out there wanting to say something or ask something, you might have to stand up. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. We've talked, or you two have talked a lot about industrialization and kind of deindustrialization as well. And that process has affected this region so specifically, you know, the Midwest specifically. And now we see a new sort of social formation in terms of labor in the way of Amazon and these factories and these other type of factories, maybe not industrial factories, but these same sort of formations where there's hundreds of people working at a facility. And I just kind of wanted to ask both of you, what do you think are similarities, possibly maybe differences between this industrial factory model versus this warehouse factory sort of distribution center economy of, you know, delivery and places like, and service workers as well, obviously.
You want to go
what do you
first,
think you're
Donald? Or?
contrasting or anything like
Well, the way I see that is like this one here. The decay of the old industrial, imperialistic, colonial, neo-colonial system has outlived its historical usefulness. And the new system of dynamic digital finance, global capital is growing. However, historically, I'm gonna say it like this here. Robots and laptops, they don't buy anything. So I said, hey, wait a minute here. This is in our favor this time. So that's what I'm saying. We've made a leap from the decay of the last historical epoch to the new historical epoch, which is in our favor. But we got the fight. The biggest fight I see is between ignorance and knowledge. And that's where the best of us is going to come into the picture.
So I'm guessing that you want to weigh in also on that.
I mean, you know, I've been out of the workforce for a while. And right now I'm out in like California. I'm in Silicon Valley right now. And you know, like I walk every day. So that has given me a chance to see the UPS driver. I see the Amazon drivers all the time. And you know, I be waving at them stuff. I be giving them the power salute and all that. And every now and then we get opportunity to talk. And I'm mentioning this because when people are no longer organized on the basis of the factory system, we have to figure out how to form a mass consciousness in a different way. I felt good about this last wave of organizing. I forget the brother name that emerged as one of the leaders in the organizing the Amazon workers, because I know his hands are full.
Chris
see-
Long,
Chris Smalls.
yeah.
Yeah,
Chris
no,
Long.
he just outstanding job. As revolutionaries, though, we have a job that's a little different than just being unionists. I'm not against unionists. I was a union rep for a while. But as revolutionaries, our fundamental goal and task is always to educate, to inform, to enlighten, to try to grapple with and figure out what's facing us in front of us. I don't know how we're going to do this, but we have to figure out how to win over to a single vision, that forward moving section of folks. And it changes over time, right? The social forum, it was one wave and kind of people. Then Occupy produced another wave and different kind of folks. Then the Black Lives Movement produced another wave and kind of focus. Then you had like the Million Women March. When was that? When the women showed up, I was like, oh, it's on now. Then the enemy, like in his arrogance, made a mistake with Roe versus Wade. I'm convinced this will be a decisive mistake in history that turned things in our favor. They made a mistake that can never be undone. And we have an opportunity to take to our working class its vital issues and the need. We're in a period similar to the Civil War. Going into the Civil War, it's going to involve election campaigns, right? I don't know who might emerge as the next Abraham Lincoln, right? And we're going to have to study that kind of history super quick. Like, see, when Lincoln come in, he didn't win the majority of the votes. The vote was split. Breckinridge and whoever the other guy was, they got 6 votes. Lincoln got 4. Lincoln faced this task. How can I win the people to the side of revolution without making the southern states break away? So it took him time to figure out the timing of the Emancipation Proclamation, winning over the lower section of the working class, which was slaves. My point in all this is we are going to have to dig back into our history to figure out like the forms of organization. How do we struggle? How can we best in real time in Michigan support Big Gretchen? I'm a Big Gretchen man. She needs to run for president in 2024. Whitmer I'm talking about. But my point is, we are gonna have to stretch our brains and figure out how to walk this new path and new road to revolution that's opened up to us. And it has never existed. Like, this ain't gonna be a repeat of Russia, China, nobody. You know, we're gonna have to figure it out. Yeah. In other words, I don't know.
Any other comments or questions? Is that Odile?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're gonna have to speak up because you have a soft voice, I know that.
Okay, well, right now, there is this war in Ukraine, and the US doesn't want to negotiate, doesn't want to de-escalate, and they want to put nuclear weapon in Poland next to Russia. So Putin is going to be put in a corner, and that's not good. We are on the verge of being bombed by nuclear weapon. So we have to waken up to that. A lot of people right now, we speak about, labor struggle, but what about those nuclear weapons? So we have to think about this. And Ukraine is a very important question right now because it's a war between Russia and USS and the US, and they have tons of nuclear weapons. So I don't know. People have to think a little bit about that. I don't see any movement or anybody speaking about that, and it worries me.
Well, I didn't hear actually a question, but I think that your comments about the urgency of addressing the escalation of the war in Ukraine and the dangers that it represents is a really important one. And I think that, maybe I could just expand it into the discussion for tonight to say, how do we look at it from the standpoint of revolutionary labor activity? I think that we're seeing that in a lot of countries where there are people who are out in the streets in many countries right now in opposition to the war. And that does seem to hold some revolutionary potential. But I wonder what you think about that, Donald. Do you want to take it on that?
Ever since the dawn of imperialism, they thrive on war. And every peace conference is just another, it ends into war. And so this is another long story, but the Ukraine was the last place that the Bolsheviks had to win over as far as the seizure of power. And this is in this guy by the name of John Reed, who wrote this book, 10 Days to Shift the Earth. And it was those 10 days he was in old Russia when it happened, when they seized power. So, but what I'm saying is that the dynamic of it fitting today's terms is always going to be an educational one. When you got the decay, and at the same time you got a glimpse of what we could do what's already here. And now this is my biggest argument now that makes me, this was way back then. You got the knowledge to go to space, you can spin the thing around, and you can pay somebody to carry you to and fro. But you can't get the street lights here to go with the traffic. Something wrong. Well, you know what I'm saying. So we got bigger chances now. And my main thing is you got to be able to make history where you make footprints at. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I know that there are a lot of anti-war activists out there in the audience, and I'm really interested in hearing if anybody wants to contribute to the relationship between the topic of the film tonight and the anti-war struggle, which is very weak in the United States right now, but we're trying to make it grow. Does anybody have any comments about that, who is involved in the anti-war work right now? How those are connected and how we draw the connection? I mean, one thing I would think of immediately is when you look at the condition of the working class, trying to draw the connection between the use of resources that go into war making, but I don't know if anybody wants to address that or comment on, go ahead.
I'll just make a quick comment, which is that the working class is fodder for these wars. So if you keep the working class down, keep them underpaid, low paid, whatever, then they are more encouraged to go into the military. So they can make a living, or so they can go to college. And that's, to me, they're just fed into the war machine. And that, to me, that's an economic connection between the wars and the keeping down of the working people.
Thank
That's
you.
why when that guy in that video said, if you can get a decent salary, that means you can pay dues. If you can pay dues, you can strengthen your union. So those kinds of struggles are so important for keeping young men and women out of the wars.
Does anybody else want to comment on that or anything else? Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, so I can hear Darryl pretty good. I can hear Catherine more or less good. I'm in the hearing challenge, but I'm in the middle of the fight anyhow. So even when I only hear pieces of what's being said, I try to get what's my role in the middle of something I partly understand. One of the ways I do that is to write for ground cover. So, and October 1st ground cover that Joe and Jay are going to be selling off. I ran out. Please buy one. Read my article, The Problems We Cause for Ourselves, and get some kind of feedback. Now, the best communication in a meeting that I ever had was in Cuba, because if you spoke, you had a microphone. There were halls that were set up with a microphone at every desk. And the sound system was good enough. I could hear everything and I could speak when it had something to say. And I'm going to say sound systems are going to be increasingly important. And there are systems where you run a wire around the room and everybody has a headphone on and a speaker, and you can hear each other better. And I can hear everything in Cuba. I think we need better sound systems to organize ourselves. Now, hard hearing, talk louder. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah.
Hard hearing, talk louder, because we know there's somebody out there that can't hear that good, and we want you to hear us. Now, with this sound system, I can hear Darryl the best. So how do we get in our, and my role is, I've said this a few times, I'm so grassroots, I'm underground half the time looking for a crack in the cement. And ground cover has been one of my cracks in the cement where I've peaked up. So I really, and also the Ann Arbor Coalition Against the War. Every Friday we're at 5:30 out by the post office. Now I'm more out of Detroit, but I'm getting to know Ann Arbor. I was foreclosed. I beat the foreclosure, but I lost the house. So I'm in a situation of a lot of people that are almost making ends meet, because I've got family in Cuba, and that situation takes a lot. We need to end all the wars, the sanctions wars, the propaganda wars, the information wars, all those things that are more dangerous than the bombs that they drop. But it's a full spectrum war machine, and ground cover right now is my crack. I'm popping up through, throwing something out of that.
Okay, so everybody got to buy ground cover.
Anybody want to hear some more about the Ukraine?
Yeah, does anybody have a question before let me have this question real quick.
I already did one, but I was also curious while we were on the anti-war topic too. I think speaking as kind of, I mean, obviously not an avatar of the whole generation, but speaking kind of from the millennial Gen Z crowd. I think part of, you talked about the anti-war movement being weak in the United States at the moment. I think that's largely because we've grown up with war being a constant. Like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan started when I was pretty young, and have been so ongoing that war has become something that is so normalized for us that it's I don't know how to phrase it exactly, but it's to the point where it almost seems absurd to flip out over it, or you get really aggressive about it because it's just such an ingrained part of life. And I guess I'd ask, how do you counter that? Obviously, you know, there are the paradigms in which we live that are surrounding us and engulf us. How do you make people question those to the point where you say, hey, you know, that thing you're very used to, it's not okay, right? Because I think just as normalized as it is for us, like war, a lot of us is, I don't know, it's as normal as eating or breathing. It's just a fact of life. How do you call that into question effectively?
So to rephrase your question so that it is audible to everyone, mentioning how especially people in the younger generations, and Donald and I are members, that all you've known is the U.S. being involved in a war somewhere. And actually, that's kind of true for us as well. So I would say that in trying to rephrase your question, part of it, you know, how do we raise the consciousness, I guess it would be, of the people who are so accustomed to the concept of U.S. endless wars that it seems not to really be something worth struggling over or thinking about. And so I don't know, I think that's kind of what you were asking. I don't know, Donald or Darryl, if you want to, I know Darryl wanted to say something about the Ukraine, which I would assume would be real, you know, related to this question as well. Do you want to go first, Donald, or shall we go to?
Go let Waste, see what Waste got to say.
Okay, you're on.
You know, I understand the question to be basically, how do we approach war in the most empire and imperial state in the history of the world that for the last 222 years has been at active war with somebody with the exception of 10 to 12 years? That is a good question. Let me back up a little bit, because right now I am experiencing fear in a way I've never experienced it before. You know, I'm from Detroit. I really thought I was a tough guy. I honest to God believed I was a tough guy until this year, when I had to think along with the majority of people in our country of what it means to face the prospect of nuclear war. In April, President Biden, he renounced the standing policy that said the US would not be the first to use nuclear weapons. He renounced that in April of this year. Why did he do it? He did it as the result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Let me be real clear, I don't have a horse in the race. When a man say he ain't got a horse in the race, it means he don't care who wins. However, I have a understanding, I think I do, in a position about what happens when you threaten Russia with destruction. I'm telling you that every generation, some idiot says, this time we are going to beat the Russians, right? That happened in World War I, but it happened before then when Napoleon penetrated the gates of Moscow. World War I produced the Russian Revolution. A generation later, some idiot said, we are gonna beat the Russians this time, and it produced World War II, German fascism, right? Today, we have a group of idiots saying, this time we're gonna beat the Russian bear. Well, we're not gonna beat the Russian bear. We will be defeated for a lot of reasons. Defeated means we'll be pushed into the Western Hemisphere. Now, I did read Putin's speech. He did not threaten to use nuclear weapons. That's not what he said. You have to read the speech for yourself. He threatened to use whatever means possible so that the Russian state and people would not be annihilated. Now we need to look at things because we're in an empire state, right? Our rulers do not accept surrender. They don't accept surrender. Most states accept surrender. Our state don't accept surrender. They're gonna bomb you to death, as they did in Libya and Syria. We should not forget what they did in Yugoslavia. See, if we want to know the real attitude of our government, they don't care if you black or white. Look at Yugoslavia. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have to fight this thing out on the basis of electoral politics, who we get out of office, who we put into office. We have to fight it out in the streets. We have to fight it out on local levels, state levels, and national levels. And we have to look at it and figure out the openings. We are in empire, the most empire of all states, you know, and it's going to take us a while to shift politics in this country. I think we might be prepared for a third party this time, or a radical split in the Democratic and Republican parties. I am watching the Republican Party come apart. I'm watching the Democratic Party come apart. I just don't know exactly what we need to do next. But that's part of our discovery. I guess what I'm saying is that war and anti-war is the real questions of our era. It's not like in the 60s and stuff. War and anti-war is the fundamental question. It's a question of survival and stuff. Now, what am I afraid of? Okay, they just had the referendum in the Ukraine. You had the Donbass and other provinces that voted in favor of being with Russia. That signals to Russia that the kid gloves come off. They are getting ready to, in my view, they are getting ready to fundamentally defeat the insurgents in the Ukraine. From there, in my view, Poland is next. They will not accept you placing weapons, missiles on their border that can destroy the Russian people. They can't accept that, you know? So it's things like those very real scenarios that have me scared. But we have to figure out our next step. We have to fight against war and insanity of sending 20, 30, 80 billion dollars to the Ukraine, and you can't get a crust of bread. Those kind of issues, I think if we take to a section of the American people, we can win, you know. In other words, I agree, we're in trouble. We're in trouble.
So we're getting towards the point when we will be wrapping up, and we have to have everybody out of here well before 10. Noah says, I can't see in the back, so if there's somebody back there, you're gonna have to tell me.
Yep, there is. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
So earlier, the Palestine question was mentioned, and as was the role of the Wayne State newspaper in informing people about the Palestinian struggle. And my question is, was there a connection made between the struggle of Palestinians and labor movement here in Michigan? Was that connection made? And I also know that second question here is, I know there's a lot of people in the room who are involved in the emerging many labor struggles here in Michigan. What recommendations do you have for those people and how to build those connections between international questions, international solidarity questions, and labor in the labor movement here?
Okay, thank you. So there were two parts to that question. One was about the relationship of the Palestinian struggle to the labor movement that was alluded to earlier in the discussion tonight, and any elaboration about that. And then the second part was looking at the current labor struggles that are going on, ways that can take form more internationalism. Is that kind of where you were going with that? More internationalism to the struggles that are going on?
Yeah, are there any recommendations for how to draw those links between international struggles and local struggles?
International and local struggles. Okay. Do you want to answer anything about that? about the Palestine issue with regard to the labor movement back when the League of Revolutionary Black Workers were so active and so important, and or the building international solidarity with at this point.
Let me get some of that.
Go
'Cause
ahead.
I'll be- Okay, yeah, because you know I don't have a bunch of companies, so I'll be lonely. Okay. Back in the 60s, the first strike was at Dodge, Maine, where they set up the first organization, Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement, DRUM. Inside the plant itself, you had a large group of Palestinians that had been hired. Now, it wasn't just the Palestinian, but the Arab workers were always victimized because the labor recruiters who would get them jobs would have them paying them money every week for months on end, up to a year, to get the application in and get a job. So we found unity around basic issues on the shop floor and in defense of their rights. We used to publish our newsletters in Arabic. That allowed us to form a real basis of unity that was real. Then you have this Arab community in Detroit around River Rouge, right? The old Ford Rouge complex. There were physical links with these communities is what I'm trying to describe. It wasn't that we just did it based on us sounding good, but we had a way to work together. We have to discover the meaning. See, it's different now. I mean, like, yes, it makes a difference where you're from, because we still are suffering from lingering colonialism. It makes a difference. However, I don't know if we're gonna operate on the basis of any identity like we did in the past. And I'm saying that not because identity is bad, I'm saying it because there's no place like a factory system that amalgamates us together. That's how I'm saying it. So we have to discover different means and stuff for unity. I mean, that's all I can say about the Palestinian question, which is dire. You know, I mean, what the Israeli state done is just like gonna go down in history as like one of the most horrific aggressions, you know, in human history, you know. But we have to discover the means to demilitarize. And in that process, we can get things done. I'm not trying to evade it, it's just that it's so different from the 60s and 70s, you know.
Thank
I don't
you.
know if that hit it.
Did you want to add anything, Donald?
Well, it's like all pictures of war. If you do all if you doing all your homework, you're gonna come up with a way to resist in just such a way that you're gonna take it to the next level. That is the determination, man. The right to exist to resist, and that's the best I can say for that one.
Does anybody in the audience want to add anything about answer to how do we internationalize our struggle for workers' rights as well as against war? Go ahead.
So I was a member of the Starbucks Workers United movement, and I was a part of, no, don't applaud me, this is kind of a shit show right now. But initiative that we had started and had mentioned was how do we reach out to the actual production agricultural workers who are making this coffee, make sure their voices are heard, to make sure that we're not just getting the bag at the expense of their increased exploitation. Transportation logistics workers could refuse to handle package or products made in Israel, made and similar to the boycott movement against South Africa. Like there are these direct places where, because this is such a globalized system, where we directly interact with the products of exploitation internationally and find those places where the international becomes local and use the power we have over our own local lives as a lever to push back there. That's what you can do.
Excellent point. Any other comments before we end our program tonight? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, there's somebody else up there, but I can't see them. But go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's just been a wow. It's like reliving my life. Every street, it seemed like they're there, and they were showing me a picture about,
Do you want to use a
film.
microphone? Since
in
you're
the
down
film
here?
about, yeah, I was just saying, it was kind of like, living, like seeing my life up on the screen here. I I was born and raised in Detroit, and the places that were talked about, my father,
Mike, to your mouth.
retired from Dodge Main, worked there 37 years. My uncle from Buick, he worked there 40 years, and another uncle who worked in another, worked also with, he worked with Ford. So I grew up in there. I grew up through the rebellion in '67, troops marching, riding up and down our streets. I've seen, came just, I'm 64, so the war in Vietnam was just ending, but a lot of my relatives and cousins and people, guys your age, you and Abdul here, Brother Darryl, I saw them, go through having to make decisions and choices. Many of them did go to Nam, and so anyway, I just stand here and happy to hear my friend Abdul, Brother Darryl, and for this for you showing this film because it's kind of just like took me back to like how I grew up, and it was good to see the connections that you're able to make to the Black Workers League and the in union efforts, the Black aspect of union organizing there, and the issues that were brought up. So I just had to say something, but thank you for having this forum.
Oh, that's a wonderful note. I'd like to leave with that ringing in my head, and I think we all would feel the same way. So it's just wonderful that so many people came out tonight, and Noah is going to continue to try to have further red movie nights, and we will get the word out.
So if you want to see more of these, there's 3 things you can do. We have a bucket here if you got cash. There is a GoFundMe where you can donate there. And there's a sign-up sheet outside where you can put your information. We'll let you know. We're trying to get as many organizations in this area together to have have talks like this, get closer together, and build some kind of unity.
Okay, everybody, we've got some great ideas that we're flying around about some Cuban cinema, some Argentinian cinema, some Angolan cinema, Japanese cinema. I think we've got some really good ideas that we're coming up with that you won't see anyplace else, I guarantee you. Just like you won't see this. So please donate if you can, and go to the GoFundMe, and we'll keep this going. And great, thank you so much, Noah and Madeline. Where she is. There she is. Thank you, Madeline, for your work on this. Thank you, everyone.